So I've been doing a lot of Young Turks videos lately, and honestly, it wasn't my intention to do all of them, but there have been so many developments, and I was off for a week because I was at Dallas CPAC, so I'm catching up and I'm bringing you all this content at once so we can move on to other things, because there's always something new that pops up in the news cycle, and I'd rather get all of this backlog out of the way before we get into it. But one of the major themes that I've been covering related to the Young Turks is the fact that what's happening with Jimmy Dore, what's happening with Glenn Greenwald, what's happening with Kyle Kalinske is not unique. This is stuff that the Young Turks have been doing all the time throughout their whole history. What's unique about this is that they're doing it to lefties that their audience actually has some knowledge about, so it's backfiring on them. But this is how they treat conservatives, Republicans, anybody that they disagree with when they're on the left of that person all the time. And a perfect example of this is a video that I caught thanks to Devin Tracy. By the way, if you want to support him, Censored TV, use promo code AIU, or support him on Patreon for $5. Yes, that's plugs in 2 videos in a row, but honestly, really helps out. So go over there and support him if you want to see his videos. Is them putting out a video talking about how Ben Carson thinks families were better or slavery was good for black people. Think about that. The Young Turks is going to smear a guy saying that he was pro-slavery, and I'm not being hyperbolic, that is the message that they're going to put out, and they're saying he's doing this for the white man. Also, the video is brought to you by my patrons and my Subscribe Star subscribers. No sponsor, let's just get into it.
Ben Carson was at CPAC doing what Ben Carson does best. Let's watch.
Well, when you look at what the black community has been through, go all the way back to slavery. It was the family, the strong family units, and the faith in God that got people through that. They got people through Jim Crow, through severe segregation, through all the difficulties. But what really had a negative impact was when the government came along and said, there, you poor little thing. I'm going to take care of all your needs, and started implementing policies that were destructive to family formation. Those are the things that have hurt the black community the most.
Now, I feel the need to explain what Ben Carson actually said in this clip that the Young Turks played, because the Young Turks are going to react to what I can only imagine is a completely different clip. Ben Carson was talking about how families and togetherness got black people through the harshest times in the United States of America. And one of the things that has stalled black America in this nation post-Jim Crow, after the Civil Rights Act was passed, was our welfare programs, because these programs incentivize, among other things, people to not form families, not get married, because single mothers are the primary beneficiaries. They get more money from welfare programs. That's what Ben Carson was saying, that black people endured suffering throughout history due to the strength of their families, but these welfare programs, creating these incentives that were made to help black people, have actually backfired. And this is backed up by the numbers. You can look at the marriage rates, and you can look at all of the statistical data that says that single-parent households have significantly worse outcomes. That's not to say that people don't make it out of single-parent households, or getting divorced as parents is inherently immoral. Again, my parents are divorced. I lived in a single-parent household, and I'm doing pretty decent right now. But overall, statistically, you can't ignore the trends that this is a huge problem. Now, the reason I say that is because the Young Turks reaction is not going to be anywhere near proportional to what Ben Carson actually said. Let's start it up.
So if he's talking about the policies that were in fact destructive to family formation for the black community, things like discriminatory criminal laws, right? Discriminatory arrests when it comes to the war on drugs, when it comes to the 1994 crime bill, like all of that stuff.
Redlining,
Redlining. I mean, but he's not talking about that. He's talking about the social safety net.
So of course, Anna, who's agitated from the jump based on Ben Carson's benign statements, is freaking out and talking about all this different racism that's causing the problems in the black community. Now, I've talked about this multiple different times on this channel. People on the left are uncomfortable talking about the disparities between racial groups in this country because they feel guilty about it. They feel like if they can approach it dishonestly, they can obfuscate their own guilt for the comparative success of their group.
Discriminatory criminal laws, right? Discriminatory arrests when it comes to the war on drugs.
There are no discriminatory drug laws. Let me make that clear. If you're going to go to crack sentencing versus powdered cocaine sentencing, then you'd actually have to look into the reasons for the distinctions in the sentencing. Number one, first and foremost, it is because the violence in the supply chain for crack cocaine was street-level violence. Compare that to cocaine, powdered cocaine, which the violence was associated overseas higher up in the supply chain. This is why Pablo Escobar is a legendary figure in the drug game, because he was so violent back in Colombia. Most of the crack cocaine arrests also had violence attached. This is why crack cocaine has higher sentences. And whatever you're going to say about how more black people or black people disproportionately get arrested for crack cocaine is completely irrelevant when you compare the crack cocaine sentences to the crystal meth sentences, which are identical. And after you do that, you should just pick a year where people were arrested for crystal meth, and what you'll find out is that black people represent less than 5% of the people being arrested for crystal meth. This is because crystal meth is largely used among white and secondarily among Hispanic communities. In fact, a significantly greater population of white people have been arrested and have had to deal with those mandatory minimum sentences associated with crack cocaine than black people, even by the percentages per capita, however you want to break it down, have been arrested connected to crystal meth. This is due to the fact that we have biases against drugs that are smokable. This is due to the fact that these drugs are more concentrated, and a bunch of other things, none of which have to do with race. In fact, the biggest pushers of higher crack sentences were black politicians who represented people who had to deal with the street level violence associated with this drug. So Anna, you're wrong.
When it comes to the 1994 crime bill, like all of that stuff.
Redlining, housing.
I mean, but he's not talking about that.
The 1994 crime bill was passed when crime was a significantly bigger issue in the United States of America. There was nothing racist about it, unless you think it's racist that black people represent a significantly higher proportion of the murderers and serious violent criminals as compared to other groups in the United States of America. You can't be surprised when you have higher rates of violent crime that higher rates of arrest and charges and convictions for that higher violent crime are going to follow that. And as for redlining, this goes to Ben Carson's original point.
And the faith in God that got people through that. They got people through Jim Crow, through severe segregation, through all the difficulties.
So I've talked about this many times on this channel. Redlining started in the mid-1930s. It went to 1968 or somewhere thereabouts. Somebody can fact check me on the details. I might put them on screen. Doesn't really matter. This is a graph, according to the US Census Bureau, of home ownership across the history of the United States. Look whose home ownership rates grew during the redlining period at virtually the same rate of increase as white people. As Ben Carson pointed out, strong families got black people through tough times, and this would be a perfect example of this. This period of time coincides with black people in the United States of America going from a poverty rate of about 80% to 49%. That 40% reduction in poverty had to do with the Black Great Migration, where they moved up to the north, and it had to do with their solid family structure and their commitment to hard work and education. Also, during this period, which black people were poorer in the 50s than they were in the post-60s, the black homicide rate was going down, not up. So for those of you who think crime is due to racism or we just need to arrest poverty in order to deal with it, you're gonna have to explain why black people who were statistically more likely to be poor and there was systemic racism actually on the books, Jim Crow laws and actual discrimination, committed less crime and less murders during that period than they did the following decades.
He's talking about the social safety net. He's talking about government programs that help lift people out of poverty. That's what he's talking about. He's not talking about a broken criminal justice system. He's not talking about racism in the housing market. He's not talking about any of that.
Yeah, Anna, I know this might be hard for you to believe because you're so angry in your voice. We can hear it in your tone. I don't know why you're starting off this segment this way. But Ben Carson does not believe that the welfare system helps lift people out of poverty. In fact, he believes, and I am in agreement with him, that the welfare system incentivizes people. It creates a moral hazard to get stuck in poverty in order to receive better benefits. And I've seen this in my real life. I know Anna Kasparian was a prom queen and her dad owned a business, but I'm Hispanic. I come from a Hispanic family that lived in these projects. People don't get married intentionally in order to maximize their benefits. People find all different kinds of ways. They reduce their hours. They have a guy living in the house when he's not married in order to increase the amount of money that they have without losing any of the perks. They set themselves up in such a way because this is how they are incentivized to receive the maximum amount of government benefits, and doing so ends up cutting them off from opportunities to move up the economic ladder. If you feel like you're going to lose more benefits if you switch from part-time to full-time from the government, you might not want to make that jump, but switching from part-time to full-time, even if in the short term you make less money, will long-term allow you to earn more money. This is the struggle that a lot of people go through when they're caught in the system. This is a well-known phenomenon. Anna should know this if she studies politics, that this is what Ben Carson is arguing, but instead she's strawmanning the guy because they have no respect from him, and this is what the Young Turks do. They smear people they disagree with because they think smears are sufficient arguments.
Right? I mean, whenever you hear right-wingers talk about, oh, where are the fathers? Where are the fathers? And they're specifically talking about black families. Most of them who aren't with their families have been imprisoned for nonviolent drug offenses. Most of them
who aren't with their families have been imprisoned for nonviolent drug offenses.
How ridiculous do you have to be to say that black fathers that aren't in their children's lives, which, by the way, 72% of black kids are born out of wedlock, and fathers that are not involved in their kids' lives, it's something north of 50%, here are the comparisons, is due to them being arrested for nonviolent drug offenses and thrown in jail. Anna Kasparian believes that 50+% of the male population is in jail not for serious crimes, but for nonviolent drug offenses. So according to her, something like 80 to 90% of the black male population, once they pass the age of 15, is in jail due to the fact that they've committed violent crimes because they commit way more of them than any other group, and they're being persecuted for nonviolent drug offenses. Look, I'm not a drug warrior. I don't support the drug war, but the amount of people that are in prison doing hard time for nonviolent drug offenses is minuscule. The reason why black people are incarcerated more is because they have higher rates of violent crime. Pick the category and we'll go to the FBI statistics if you don't believe me. And if you think the FBI statistics are somehow biased, we'll go to the National Crime Victimization Survey and ask the victims who can identify their perpetrators who committed the crimes against them.
Yeah. But that's not what he's talking about. That's not what he's talking about. I'm just so, honestly, I'm tired of like wasting my life away responding to idiots like Ben Carson.
I mean, look how vicious Anna Kasparian is being to Ben Carson in this moment. We're gonna go over Ben Carson's history because Ben Carson is a little bit goofy in his religiosity, but if you actually look at what he achieved, what's concrete and provable, he is anything but a stupid guy.
But let's not bury the lead. So the family unit was strong during slavery?
It's so stupid, so stupid. Okay. The stupid rise to the top in America. Let's just be clear about that.
In case you don't know, because apparently a lot of right-wingers don't know any history, during slavery, kids would be taken away from their parents, snatched from their arms, and sold off as property to other masters. And then those kids, you would know, would have to serve those masters their whole lives, and they would be whipped and beaten, and then their kids would be taken from them.
I like how Cenk is somberly explaining slavery to us. Like this is what he wants to do. He looks for any excuse to bring it up. Yes, Cenk, we know slavery was horrible. Weird how you don't want to talk about slavery in the Arab slave trade or even the Ottoman slave trade. I mean, you are a young Turk. You talk about the glories of the Ottoman Empire. Only in the United States of America is this interesting. But to talk about, again, what Ben Carson is referring to, after the end of the Civil War, there were reports, and you can find them in our history books, of black people walking across entire states to be reunited with their families. When a slave would be set free through the various legal ways that you could do that during the time of slavery in this country, black people would work and buy members of their family and keep them technically as slaves just because they wanted to be together. This is what Ben Carson is referring to. Now, you might say it's a more romanticized version, but he's not talking about it from the perspective of Americans. He's talking about it from the perspective of the people who were enslaved, who still, through this trauma, wanted to unite their families. And Cenk's trying to crap on that, and he's saying, yeah, these people were separated. Yes, people were separated, and they were sold off separate. There were also people that were married in slavery, and, there's questionable reservations about converting people that you own as property to your religion, but Ben Carson's point still stands. These people still cared about their family, and they would still go through exorbitant means to be reunited with them during the course of slavery and post-slavery.
But Ben Carson says the family unit was stronger during slavery and the government ruined it.
This is exactly what I'm talking about. Think about how far away we've moved from what Ben Carson actually said, but it's about to get a lot worse because the Young Turks are going to get even more nasty against Ben Carson.
Now, by the way, who freed the slaves? The government. In fact, we fought a whole war with the South to free the slaves. Hundreds of thousands of Northerners died to free the slaves because the government said so. Because Abraham Lincoln said, no, we're not going to let you secede and we're not going to let you keep people as slaves. That was a government decision.
I love how Cenk thinks this is a nailed it point. Welfare programs are good today because the government freed the slaves. Well, Cenk, check this out. Who instituted slavery in law? The government. Oh my God, checkmate. How about this? When the Confederacy seceded from the Union, they formed what is called a government, and then there was a civil war between two governments. So therefore, since I have two instances of governments doing bad things, and in fact, since the states seceded individually, I have multiple instances of governments doing bad things. Therefore, modern welfare programs are not good. Like, is this the level of logic that we're operating at? Is this how dumbed down the conversation is? Do you think that Ben Carson doesn't side with the Northerners in the Civil War? Or do you think that Ben Carson is actually in favor of slavery because he's talking about how black families endured the hardship of slavery?
But the South had it all figured out, right? And I mean, they were so great to black families at the time. I mean, how can you say that? How can you say that?
How can you say that? How can you say that? Oh, I know how. He didn't say it. So Cenk, since you're the one who said that because you have that in your mind, how can you say that? Again, let's play the clip of what Ben Carson actually said and compare and contrast that to what Cenk Uygur just put on Ben Carson.
When you look at what the black community has been through, go all the way back to slavery. It was the family, the strong family units, and the faith in God that got people through that. They got people through Jim Crow, through severe segregation, through all the difficulties.
But the South had it all figured out, right? And I mean, they were so great to black families at the time. I mean, how can you say that? How can you say that? So this fool, greedy fool, used by the Republicans to attack any program that would help black people in this country.
That would help anyone in this country.
And Ben Carson, God damn it, haven't you made enough money? And you already did the scam where you went on the speaking circuit and you did your book and you did your dance for the white man and you got paid handsomely for it.
Just imagine if somebody on the right said that about somebody on the left. People freak out when black conservatives talk about the Democratic plantation. And honestly, I've been critical of that analogy because I don't think that wins people over to your side when you compare them to slaves for disagreeing with you. But Cenk just said he did his dance for the white man. Now, this is the point where I want to get into the history of Ben Carson because I think it's really important that you guys actually know his story. So Ben Carson grew up relatively broke in Detroit. Now from Detroit, Ben Carson actually got himself into Yale and he graduated from Yale with his bachelor's degree. After Ben Carson graduated from Yale and went on to medical school when he was done with that, one of the first things he did was go back to Detroit to help other black kids from Detroit get themselves into Yale. This is the person that Cenk Uygur is morally flexing on. This is the person that Cenk Uygur is virtue signaling on and is saying is doing a jig for the white man. Think about that. Now, Ben Carson became famous because as a neurosurgeon, he was a part of the team that first successfully separated conjoined twins. And at age 33, Ben Carson became the director of pediatrics neurosurgery at Johns Hopkins Children's Center, making him the youngest person to be the chief of pediatric neurosurgery in the country. Not the youngest black person to hold that position, the youngest person in the entire United States of America, full stop. But Cenk is going to flex on how Ben Carson's an idiot. Cenk is going to flex on how Ben Carson is selling out the black community. That's what Ben Carson got famous over. That's what Ben Carson published his first book on, being in the room and a part of the team that separated conjoined twins. But Cenk's saying he's doing a jig for the white man.
That would help anyone in this country.
And Ben Carson, God damn it, haven't you made enough money? And you already did the scam where you went on the speaking circuit and you did your book and you did your dance for the white man.
Also, since we're on the topic of Ben Carson's book, Ben Carson, the author, you know, Dr. Ben Carson, who became famous after participating in the separation of conjoined twins and then decided to write books, at least Ben Carson actually earned the right to write a book, and then he wrote it before selling it to people.
My whole life, people have been telling me to do one thing. And they keep saying this, especially since I've been on the Young Turks. Every friend I have, every family member, and a lot of you guys. Will you, for God's sake, do this thing, Cenk? What is it? Write a book. Fine, you win. The name of the book is Justice is Coming. Okay, so here I got a hard copy with me here too. Is it already written? Nope. Some of it is written, but I'm working on the rest. So what you can do now, it's not out yet. You can pre-order.
Remember, Cenk has a book that's supposedly coming out. You can buy that book. You've been able to buy it for over a year, yet there's been no updates related to that book because Cenk started selling a book before it was written. So Cenk Uygur, the scam artist who's selling a book that's empty, you can pay money to Cenk for it right now, even though it's not finished, is going to criticize Ben Carson for doing a grift related to a book. Crazy.
You know that he was a really accomplished doctor and a great student. He made up a story about how he used to be violent and tried to stab his friend with a knife, but it got stuck on his belt buckle. And then Jesus saved him. And then he didn't know anything. He was a fool, a savage and a fool. And at night, an angel taught him chemistry, and that's why he got an A on his test. No, you got an A on your test, Ben, because you studied really hard, and you know that. But instead, you told white right-wingers what they wanted to hear. That the black man is a savage. That the black man is a savage.
So this is where we get into the goofier aspects of Dr. Ben Carson, but I wanted to lay out his actual background in education and what he achieved in his life and compare it to Cenk before we get to this point. Because Cenk actually is touching on some things that are true, but I just want to point out that he used the word savage in there because he's trying to make the case that Ben Carson has altered his life story in his books in order to appeal to racist white people that hate black people. That's not the case. Ben Carson is an extremely religious person, and I'm not saying it's necessarily a bad thing, and I think there's root in the truth of his story that he was probably motivated by religion, or he might even feel saved by his religion into improving his life and going on to college. That being said, Ben Carson's books are full of instances where their stories are basically like God intervened on his behalf. And the belt buckle thing is one that Donald Trump made fun of when he was campaigning against him because it's ridiculous.
He took a knife and he went after a friend and he lunged that knife into the stomach of his friends, but lo and behold, it hit the belt. It hit the belt. And the knife broke. Give me a break. Give me a break. Give me a break. The knife broke. Let me tell you, I'm pretty good at this stuff. So, I have a belt. Somebody hits me with a belt's going in because the belt moves this way. It moves this way. It moves that way. He hit the belt buckle. Anybody have a knife? You want to try it on me? Believe me. It ain't gonna work. You're gonna be successful. But he took the knife, he went like this, and he plunged it into the belt. And amazingly, the belt stayed totally flat. And the knife broke. How stupid are the people of Iowa? How stupid are the people of the country to believe this crap?
Now look, the root of the story might be true that Ben Carson was an angry kid, he was acting up, and then he found God, and it led him to the successes in his life. But the idea that Ben Carson pulled the knife and was gonna stab somebody, but then God intervened, and I know it's not said, but it is heavily implied that this miracle associated with Ben Carson helped free him from this situation, and the knife was deflected by a belt buckle is ridiculous, and that's why Trump was making fun of it. Also, the chemistry story is ridiculous. Ben Carson said that he didn't know anything about chemistry, and then he took a nap at his desk instead of studying, and then he saw a person that didn't really have a face and he thought might have been an angel, and they started writing stuff on the chalkboard, and then when he went to take the test the next day, that was the answers to the test. He got that from somebody in his dream that may have been God or an angel. And while we can probably agree that Ben Carson's faith in God is genuine, I don't think that that story, which seems like a fable, something like symbolically true, actually happened the way that Ben described it. I think he's romanticizing it. He's dramatizing it. Especially since Ben Carson's dorm mates describe him as somebody who didn't go out late at night and actually put on a button-down suit, a blazer, and a tie to study at his desk in his dorm room. Now, if somebody like me who's not religious actually thinks Ben Carson's actual story, without any of the dramatization or the invocation of extra religious and miracle work, is more impressive than the stories that he portrays to the public, because it shows a guy who is incredibly dedicated. He wasn't the best student by his grades in college, but he persevered and he ended up becoming successful because even if he didn't feel like he was smarter than the other kids, he worked twice as hard as those other kids. And then when he graduated, he went back to his hometown to help other people get on the path that he got on. And even though I'm not religious, I can respect the fact that he feels like his religious influence played a big role, so he pushes that religious influence.
White right-wingers, what they wanted to hear, that the black man is a savage and that the government is what's taking his family away. Now, slavery wasn't so bad. You had good Christianity and families, and the government ruined it in all their ways. And a black man being smart. No, they don't want to hear that story.
Again, this is what Cenk takes away from what Ben Carson said. This is what Cenk takes away from Ben Carson showing legitimate concern about the decline of the black family and the negative impacts of that decline. He just puts words in his mouth and says that Ben Carson has sold out to the white man. Absolutely disgusting. And again, we hear the word savages from Cenk's mouth. It never came from Ben Carson's mouth, from Cenk's mouth, because that's on his mind.
So you told him a story about how you were an idiot, didn't know anything, didn't study at all, but learned chemistry magically through an angel, and you told him that fairy tale they wanted to hear about their religion, right? Now, this is a more uncomfortable fact, but how was Christianity used during slavery? To placate the slaves so they wouldn't revolt. Don't worry. Of course your life is miserable now, but you're gonna have everything up in heaven.
Yes, during slavery, just like in every other part of the world that had slavery, which is every part of the world, people who were enslaved were converted to the slave master's religion. This is not unique to America, but listen to Cenk talk about it like this only happened in America, and the fact that black people are Christians in the United States of America now in the future, a faith that they've accepted, bothers Cenk.
And I don't disagree that people's faith got them through a lot of tough times, including Jim Crow and including slavery at times, and certainly all through all the discrimination. I'm not trying to argue against their faith.
So what Cenk just did there was agree with what Ben Carson actually said. He's like, I'm not saying that slavery didn't get black people through some tough times. That's what Ben Carson said. He said religion and family got black people through tough times, specifically those examples, slavery and Jim Crow. So Cenk just agreed with what Ben Carson said, and he's going to continue to argue against all these things that Ben Carson didn't say, because Cenk would rather make up things you didn't say to attack you to fill time on his show than actually talk about what you actually said.
And I went and visited, when I was in Charleston, a plantation and a slave market. It is, if you've never done that, you should. It's jarring. It's jarring how they would prepare humans as products. They would shine them up and they would feed them after a long trek from wherever they got captured or bought. And then they would feed them only for a couple of days right before the auction. so they could sell their products better.
So now Jank's going to tell us about him visiting a slave market in Charleston because he thinks it's really a special story. He's going to talk about how they fed people and they made them look nice before they were sold. Yeah, obviously, anytime you sell anything, you make it more marketable. What I'm curious about is why Jank just doesn't fly over to Africa and go look at a slave market that is in modern times, or watch HD video of people being sold into slavery today. Oh, you don't want to talk about that. You want to talk about slavery of the past. Got it.
But Ben Carson tells you, oh, no, families were in great shape. African-American families were in great shape during slavery.
I mean, it's just ridiculous at this point. Jen keeps hamming it up and adding to what Ben Carson said, even though he never said it. Ben Carson talked about black families enduring the struggle of slavery, and now Jank is making it seem like Ben Carson is pro the slavery of Africans in the United States of America. Think about how disgusting that is. Think about how nasty that is to do to somebody when you know it's false. And again, they're not playing any other clips. The first clip is what they're basing this off of. It's absolutely disgusting. And again, this is what the Young Turks do all the time. This is who they are.
Because he's going to get paid a little bit more from the racist who buy his books, who pay for his speeches. Was it worth it, Ben? You were a doctor. You were a successful doctor. Was it worth it to betray your people, everything that is right in the world?
Was it worth it to betray your people and everything that's right in the world? Ben Carson is concerned about the marriage rates of black people in the United States of America, which Cenk is grouping him in. He's saying your people, because he thinks that leads to problems down the line, and he's trying to solve that, and Cenk considers that a betrayal because he's putting responsibility and accountability on the people that are having problems. He's saying you're in control of your own life, and you need to accept God, which he's religious, so that makes sense, and keep with a stable family because that has gotten black people through discriminatory and tough times throughout history.
Yeah, in a system that preaches the wonders of individualism, yeah, it was worth it. It was worth it for him, which is why he continues to do it.
Yeah, Anna, I know you're going on this whole communism bent, but emphasizing the individual, not looking at people as groups and prejudging them is a good thing. We're not impressed by your, individuals in the system. It's all coming. You can't wait for it. You can't miss it. She has to go harder and further left on these issues because she's being attacked by the left from people like Jimmy Dore.
I want everyone to be clear about the overwhelming messaging coming out of CPAC this year, and every year for that matter, okay? Because some so-called leftists would have you believe we could work with the Republican Party, we could work with right-wingers, we can find common ground on fighting the elites and actually accomplish policy together. They are not interested in changing the inequality in this country.
So she's talking about Jimmy Dore right there, which I told you she was going to go after people on the left and try to make her stand. And she's saying they're not a good player. They're not going to be on the same team. They don't want to fix the inequality that's supposedly a problem and go after the vague elites. Inequality is not a problem. I will say it a million times till I'm blue in the face. You do not have less because somebody else has more. The economy is not a zero-sum game. The economy actually grows faster when it grows more unequally. People always talk about the Gilded Age. People's incomes rose the fastest during that age. So if we're going into a new Gilded Age and everybody's income is rising the fastest, that sounds awesome. Even if the gap between the rich and the poor gets even bigger, nobody cares. Or people shouldn't care, but they do care because they're envious, jealous, and stupid.
And reversing this rigged economic system that has kept working people down for decades now.
I'm sorry, but working people have not been kept down. How many different times do I have to go over the charts that are misleading that come out from the left? I have multiple different videos on multiple different myths put forward by the left. You should check them out. People's incomes are growing, technology's been improving, people's standard of living is better, and if you don't believe me, feel free to go live in a 1950s lifestyle with 1950s technology, medical, and all that, and tell me you think that's better. Everybody wants something that they have as an idealized version of a bygone era, but nobody actually wants to live with the consequences of that era. Nobody wants to live within those limitations. They want everything that they have in the current times, but they want to ignore all the negatives and downsides that actually made people significantly poorer back then. Nonsensical.
They're not interested in that. That messaging from Ben Carson was specifically about doing away with whatever we have left of our social safety net, which is laughable when you compare us to other developed countries. And I'm curious, what is the family unit like? What is the nuclear family?
Oh my God, Anna, terrible pronunciation of the word nuclear. What was that?
Nuclear family unit like in social democracies, like in Scandinavian countries.
Ah yes, Scandinavia, the utopia that the left all wants to move towards, but they don't want you to actually know how much it's going to cost. If you want the top marginal tax rate to kick in at about 1.5 times the median income instead of 8 times the median income like we have in the United States of America, sign up for the Scandinavia model. I can't stand these people who can never sell you something honestly. They pretend like this utopia can be created just by taxing the rich, when the United States already has a more progressive system in terms of taxation than any of these countries. We get a greater proportion of our tax revenue from income taxes from the rich than any of them, and that's because their high rates start way lower. Look at these charts, see what it actually costs. And again, these aren't utopias. Big government and welfare spending doesn't work any better in Scandinavia than it does in the United States of America. There's a reason why people from Scandinavian countries do better in the United States of America. You have a population with high trust, high education that would be successful anywhere, and just like any place that has government largesse, they are being hampered by those programs, not helped out. Again, if you want to be in favor of that, if you still think those programs are worth pursuing, that's fine. Make the case, but make the case honestly, and make the case honestly about how much it's going to cost. Value-added taxes, income tax brackets that are higher and kick in lower, and an economy that still produces more billionaires per capita than the United States of America.
I would argue that if you're living in a system where your basic needs are met, it's going to lead to a lot less conflict in the household. A lot less stress about where you're gonna get your next meal or how you're gonna find enough money to pay your rent next month. I don't know, maybe I'm crazy, right? But all of these goons would have you believe with their disgusting propaganda that all of our problems are not a result of this rigged economic system and this inequality. They want you to think it's the meager social safety net we have left. That's the real problem. Let's do away with it so the wealthy can get more tax cuts.
I know it's comforting for people to disassociate from their own lives, to pretend that all of their problems are due to this rigged economic system and the elites conspiring against them, but it's not the case. You control your own destiny, and it's not all based on the welfare system. What Ben Carson is talking about is that the welfare system incentivizes bad behavior, and since there are more black people disproportionately in poverty, they are more likely to be affected by those bad incentives. It's that it traps people. He's not saying that the welfare system is responsible for all of the problems. He's actually saying the root cause of even that is the breakdown of the family, because if you have strong families, that can get you through the harshest of institutions.
It's garbage.
Garbage. You mean Anna Kasparian, who's better than you?
Am I saying that I'm better than you? I guess I'm going a little further than you are. Yeah, I'm fucking better than you.
Much better than you?
Okay, much better than you.
You are garbage?
You are garbage.
You're garbage?
You're garbage.
It's garbage. Anyone who purports to be on the left, who buys that there's any real economic populism on the right, please wake up. Wake up, stop being an idiot. Wake up!
Anna, why are you so angry during this video? You're at an 11 and you should be at a 1 because this is a complete non-story. And how come this is turned into an attack on Jimmy Dore? When she's talking about leftists who think they have something in common with people on the right, she's referring to people like Jimmy Dore who want to set aside the partisan differences and unite against the elites. Again, don't think that's really that impressive. I do think the goals are incongruent, but it's just interesting that this segment about Ben Carson is getting this venom out against people like Jimmy Dore or Kyle Kulinski or whatever leftist that Anna Kasparian is mad at because they didn't take her side in her blackmail attempt.
I'm super happy to take the economic populism
Jesus
when
Christ.
I see it, but that all I see is them trying to lure the left with their social policies, their cultural policies, which are grotesque. I
know that this is a non-issue in the grand scheme of this video because this video is insulting and horrifically racist toward Ben Carson, but when do conservatives ever try to lure people on the left through social policies? Typically, they go after the Democratic Party as corrupt and they say, hey, we have that in common, let's work on this solution. But social policies, that's where probably the left and the right are in the most disagreement. I mean, what a ridiculous point. Totally flubbed that one, Cenk.
Last thing on this. So why does he talk about the family unit and make such an outrageous claim about the times of slavery?
He talks about the family unit because he's a Christian, he cares about families, and he didn't make up crazy things about slavery that are untrue. He talked about how black families endured the hardship of slavery, but you won't accept that because he's a conservative and you lie for a living, so you're lying about him.
And make such an outrageous claim about the times of slavery. Because what the right-wing audience wants to hear at CPAC is, oh, the family unit among black people is broken, and that's why it's their fault for their economic condition.
Exactly.
And so that's the Fox News talking point about where are the dads? It's black people's fault.
So Cenk says this like it's outrageous, but for you to accept that it is outrageous, you have to believe that black people don't have any agency, that they are not responsible for their own lives, that they can't be expected to have kids within the confines of a marriage or raise kids in successful families. That's what Cenk is saying right here, where he's like, this is what they want you to say.
Oh, the family unit among black people is broken, and that's why it's their fault for their economic condition.
Exactly.
So first of all, Ben Carson wasn't saying that. Ben Carson was talking about welfare programs and the bad incentives that they create and how that has impacted the black community. So if anything, he was adding blame to welfare programs for the moral hazard, or as some people like to call it, the learned helplessness that ends up afflicting the people who take advantage of them.
So if you want someone to dance for you, you invite Ben Carson on, because he'll do anything for money. So he'll tell you it's now black people's fault for their current condition. It is definitely not white people's fault, right-wingers' fault.
But this is really what this video is all about. Cenk wants to say that the problems within the black community are not on the people in the black community for making their own decisions and being responsible for their own lives, having agency, you know, all the things that you would expect from any other person individually or any other group of people. He wants to say that it's white people's fault and right-wingers' fault. That's where Cenk is coming from. Cenk doesn't believe that black people have agency. In fact, this whole video is about Cenk adding things and making a mashup of what Ben Carson didn't say to say that Ben Carson is being paid to talk this way about black people, because Ben Carson couldn't possibly have, even though he's a successful person, participated in the separating of conjoined twins, any thoughts in his head that Cenk wouldn't attribute to a black person to legitimately have.
And he'll even tell you that for the hundreds of years that they snatched little babies from the arms of their mothers and fathers, that was when black people had strong family units, and that we ruined that with the government intervention. That's who Ben Carson is.
And look at him. After he says the most revealing portion of the statement about how he's mad at Ben Carson for not blaming white people for the lives of black people because Cenk doesn't believe black people have agency, he goes back to the emotional appeal of snatching little babies away from parents during slavery. Again, Ben Carson said that black people or black families endured the hardships of slavery. He didn't deny any of the hardships. His whole point was there was an attitude among people to try to keep their families together, and this was seen when black people were freed and they bought their family members as slaves because that was the easiest way to get their family back together, and post-slavery when they crossed entire states on foot just to be reunited with their relatives. But that's what Cenk took away from what Ben Carson said, because Cenk, his number one issue is that Ben Carson isn't blaming white people for the problems and decisions of black people. Anyway, that's all I really have for you guys today. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked the video, you can show me by leaving a like, subscribe for more content, follow me on all my social medias. You can support me via the support links in the description box. This has been me talking about the Young Turks smearing Ben Carson in a disgusting way. Till next time.